All my promises will be broken. Did you get a message that it's being recorded?
Mm.
So, did you have fun trick-or-treating?
We only had seven, so trick-or-treaters. We have a lot of candy left over in my house.
Sometimes that's not a bad thing.
When a whole Costco bag is and a half is left over, that's kind of bad
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of candy. Yeah.
for two people. Yeah.
Is there a lot of chocolate that you can freeze? That might help.
Most of it is the chocolate that's gone already. It's all
Of
like
course,
gum.
of course. Yeah, that would be my
So
choice
my
too.
mom volunteers at a food pantry in our old town that we used to live in. So I might horse her into like taking it to give it to them.
Yeah, get it out of the house, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we moved house a few years back, and where we used to live, we would get hundreds of kids. It was a big, like a big subdivision, and yeah, and people used to even just drive up with and drop off kids in our subdivision because it was such a big subdivision, and the kids had a great time. But then we moved kind of to a quieter place, and we didn't have a single one this year. So it's like, so my husband got to keep all the Kit Kats. He was happy. All right. Well, I'm going to get started. I'm sure Edwin will join us when he can. Looks like Lauren is there. Um, any questions? I will not promise you that I will be that efficient getting assignments back that quickly all the time, but the timing just worked out well that I could get them all done for you. So, if you have any questions about any of that, let me know. Remember, you always have the option to revise and resubmit, and all you have to do is send me an email and say, I'd like to earn back the points I lost in this section. And then all you have to do is send me that section. And you will do it the same way. You can just put it right in the same area. You can actually attach it in the gradebook area. So make sure you look at the feedback because I do take time to write a lot of feedback for you. The big thing to remember is that now, if you've got it all set and you're ready to go, this is the time to put it in your showcase portfolio. You've got the directions, you know where to put it. There's a little reflection that you have to write about it. But if you want to stay on top of things and not be in a puddle of tears by week 8, you want to make sure you upload that now and do your reflections now so that you're in a good place for that. And that's a habit that I'm hoping you will continue throughout the program. I can't tell you how it breaks my heart when I see people in the capstone course who haven't uploaded things and then they're frantically looking for things. And that's one problem. But I think the other problem is you can't genuinely reflect on something that you did months ago, even several weeks ago. So I think, as soon as you get it back from me, get it up there, put your reflection in, and you'll be golden but as you move through. Any other comments, questions, news to share? Anything exciting? I'm very serious tonight. I don't know. I don't know if I can handle serious tonight. My group last night was very serious and they got me down and out. So,
I have, I guess, something funny to share.
okay.
So I work in an unincorporated area in West Chicago. Well, I didn't know until I worked there that there are wild turkeys in West Chicago. So we see them all the time. So that's what I did yesterday. We had an institute day, and I'm walking my car, and there's just three crossing the parking lot. So if you ever want to see wild turkeys, come out to West Chicago because they're all over the place.
Do they hide as we get close to Thanksgiving? I hope.
So we really only see them in the fall. I never see them in the spring. We don't see them really all the time of year, but right now is when they're always out and walking around.
Oh, that's really funny. That's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. I play golf. Well, I play golf very poorly, but I play golf for the joy of being with my girlfriends. And we played on Friday afternoons. We just play 9 holes. And this is the last Friday afternoon we could do it because it's getting so dark and we all work. But um, just as we got to the last hole, there must have been at least 100 ducks on Silver Lake's golf course. And they were all just kind of hovering around and walking around and quacking. And then in one swoop, they all got up at the same time and took off like in a formation. And we all just stood there like, oh, is that beautiful? That was a nice way, even though it was a bad golf game, it was fun to see that. Kind of reminds you to stop and think about taking care of yourself in nature and things like that. So you had a lot to read and a lot to watch. You you were watching a lot of a big video about creating a culture for capacity building, which I think I'm hoping you see the thread that's coming through with some of these items. You also had two little videos that were dealing with curiosity and critical thinking, and then you had a very light, easy to read article, right? Which which should have probably yeah, you probably were cursing me at that time. So but I think there's if you stick with the text and not worry too much about all the charts and graphs and data, I think it was an article that had a lot of good information for you. So I'm going to put you into your groups. It's 5:07, so let's figure on about 45 minutes, which would be like 15 minutes for each of these. And if I see that you're wrapping up a little earlier than that, I'll bring us back sooner, okay? Any questions before I send you off to chat? Okay, and remember, we are recording. So when I come in, I'll be recording for Megan, and Angelica is running late. She's coming from a doctor's appointment, so she'll join us as soon as she can. Let me get my cheat sheet here. Good. Very- I'm trying to mix you up with people that so that you're again meeting more people in a small group that you maybe haven't worked with before in a small group. So it won't work perfectly, but it should be a nice variety of different perspectives. Okay, play nice.
Be nice.
Did you get your invite, Edwin? You got your invite? You're good? Okay.
Virtues, like in order for like courage, I think that's really important because honestly, looking at what my own building principals and vice principal have to, or principal and vice principal have to like do every day, like that the courage it takes to be able to, stand up for your staff when it comes to whether it be district level or even parents, um, and having that patience to, deal with multiple perspectives where it comes to, disagreements or, what is happening. I think is really important as well to have, stuff like that. Because I don't think if you don't have those, you're just, what is your role? Like, what are you doing?
Mhm. Just to like build off of that, I think it gives leaders like a almost like a moral compass. Like when kind of like in the gray area or it's hazy, when the pressure is high, it's like it gives you, I don't know, what you need to kind of make the right steps after.
Yeah. I think to add to that too is when you have a leader, I've had four principals, so it's all very different. I think when you have a principal that is clear in what they expect, not just from us, but like who they are. They portray their virtues, they portray their moral stance, they portray what they want to be shared throughout the school. It makes it easier as well for us teachers to know, like, okay, if a decision needs to be made, like I know I can make this one because this would probably go along with what, leadership is saying. When you're having to guess like what I'm supposed to do, what I can't do, what I can do, it makes it tricky for all of us to be able to as well, um, make a good decision. So when you are acting upon those virtues and making it clear, you kind of allow the people around you to also be able to act upon them as well. Um, that's what I'm adding to this.
Yeah. I wrote it helps people trust you. So if they can see that you're virtuous and, honest and you're forthcoming, that you're someone that they can trust. And if you're going to lead people, they need to be able to trust you. That's like foundational. Um, and your virtues help you to be strong. I said, and you need the strength to be in this position.
And the next question is, what do you think is the most important leadership virtue?
Yeah, that was a crazy question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's really, I think I kind of go back to that really fun reading that we had to do, of like, how they talk about like Aristotle and I forgot the other guys.
Practical wisdom.
Yes, like
Yeah.
how they all kind of correlate over or overlap into one, like both their ideas. Like they saw, I did after reading it, I did go back and look at just kind of those some of the graphs that I could actually like understand. Um, and kind of saw where those X's and the overlap was. And I think that's kind of with the leadership virtues. I think they kind of some of them overlap. Like I feel like you can't have like courage without having like being like truthful.
Yeah.
I feel like with the truthfulness that you're being courageous in showing the truth, being truthful. Um so that's how I kind of looked at it is I honestly could not think of just like a one reason for one of the virtues being the most important. I think they kind of overlap each other and you can't really have some of them overlap each other. You can't have one virtue over the other. I think you have stronger virtues than others because of, you're practicing it more, but I don't think there's one that's most important.
Yeah, and I also remember in one of our readings or a video, when we were making decisions, we had to decide which virtue would be the priority in
Mhm.
a particular situation. So that you kind of would have a toolbox, I guess, of virtues, and then depending on the situation, you would fall on one more, whatever is needed, I guess, at that point.
Like I think on things.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
that makes complete sense though.
Mhm.
Okay, looking at the curiosity video.
Yeah.
Go back up, just take a look. Lindsay, I feel like you always have good thoughts to start. From last time I got to meet
Sure.
with you for notes, I feel like you always got our conversation if you have a thought to start.
Absolutely. Well, let me look at the first one. Do you ask these
Okay.
questions when faced with a situation that requires critical thinking? Oh, I'm on the critical.
We can do
Oh, that
we
is
can
But
do that one.
that's I think the first.
We can start with critical thinking
okay. Um,
because I have those pulled up too. So it says, do you ask these questions when faced with a situation that requires critical thinking?
so for what is the purpose, goal, or point? I say yes. I
Mhm.
do think about those. What is the problem or issue being solved or discussed? I put so for me. I think I think about it, but sometimes it's not clear to me what exactly the problem is, especially when things are brought up in team meetings. Um,
I agree with that.
Sometimes I'm trying to get down to the core of what is the issue. And sometimes that's challenging when there's other information surrounding it.
I had a meeting today, not to interrupt you, but it was on a child's we were doing there's like toileting problems going on. And we met with the family and the therapist today. And I think that was one of those meetings where I was like, I need just more information to be able to problem solve this. Like it was hard to kind of dive deeper into stuff. And so when I was thinking about this critical thinking stuff, I was like, this is really interesting to think just within the school world too, like how much we face it daily and kind of go through these different problems or different questions. Sorry.
And it's hard not to just jump to conclusions
Yeah.
and think like, oh, it's this, without hearing the full story. But I feel like with curiosity, I mean, we all know what curiosity is, but just after going through the learning about curiosity, I was really quite surprised about like all the links to curiosity of like your happiness level, your intelligence level, your engagement, just how much having a strong sense of curiosity really brings to your just who you are and how important it is to just um, be curious and to instill that in students as we teach too.
Mhm.
Kind of like one of those virtues that you forget about and you don't realize how important it is to be a curious learner.
I also I've been reflecting on this. Because I don't know, I've changed from third to first grade this year. So it's been a very big difference in like creativity and projects and like they're not a thing, like just like, and I know kids in younger grades do like art projects and like there's a lot more coloring and cutting and those types of ideas. I've been really struggling with the curiosity piece though, first grade, where like, yes, they're curious about things, but I'm like, they're curious about different things. Like I'm kind of missing that curiosity piece of higher learning. Like when we be talking about something, like I used to have a parent come in every Friday and teach about a hobby or their occupation. And the kids were so curious about it. And like they had all these questions and we would dive so deep into it. And I've just been struggling a lot with curiosity just this year. And I don't know if it's just we have a new curriculum that doesn't allow a lot of curiosity. So I guess just like in the classroom, I don't know if you guys have been seeing the same thing, but I feel like and I know there's other things like, just like when you go on a walk, you're curious about things when you do like, but I just in the classroom, I feel like kids aren't as curious and like, how do you teach that as like a virtue? You know what I, so I don't know. That's just my thought.
Hi, Angelica. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's get you into your group. They're already chatting.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I guess one of the things that I find myself, I guess, reflecting a lot on is like how to best ask a question. Because I think that is where I think I it talked a little bit about the fact of like understanding like what's the context, like what is the purpose of it. Because if it's me, like I'm just asking question after question after question, but maybe it's one of those things where it's like that question or like all of those questions combined could be asked within just two, right? So instead of just kind of picking, and I think that's where I want to be able to be curious, but also be intentional as to like my curiosity. Just because, especially if you're in a room full of people, you don't want to kind of overtake the conversation either, right? So it's like, okay, how can I formulate my question so I get what I'm looking for versus having to ask like follow-up questions.
I like that. I just wrote that down. Be intentional with curiosity.
Yeah. I was just gonna say the when you mentioned intentional, it reminds me of like um this whole school year. I feel like it's like that word keeps popping up, the purpose and the intentionality, and just like reminding to share that with the teachers. But it goes along with the curiosity too. So I liked how you mentioned that as well.
And Angelica, we're on the do you engage in any of these activities to build your virtue of curiosity? So, what are your thoughts?
Sure, thank you. Um, I find that I have entered a more, I don't know what era to call this. I find that like in the past, when I would be in a collaborative discussion, I was always so eager to share my own thoughts and opinions. And now I find that when I'm especially in like the professional like context and I'm with coworkers and different school leaders, that I kind of like to take a seat back and observe and listen. And I kind of absorb every different leader's way of interpreting and analyzing information, because even the way that they speak says something about their leadership style, not just their tone, but like their pacing and how even they themselves won't respond right away when a question is directed towards them. And I find that interesting. And I find that they don't even do it in a way that could be interpreted as like disrespectful or rude. We just had a meeting yesterday and our director of curriculum was there, and many of my coworkers were engaging her with like very tough questions. And I just was like, I wonder how she's going to respond. And she just waited. She just like, she took us a beat. And I was like, and they had to wait. And then she responded. And I thought, like, wow, she just like maintained so much power in the room, having all of us wait. And then I thought that also was interesting because it allowed some of our coworkers who were very like, I think, worked up or maybe on edge about a new curriculum we're using, kind of sit with that like uneasy feeling for a second, instead of like fueling their their emotions, which were separate from their concerns they had, because they had legitimate concerns, but they also had emotions stacked on top of that. And I never thought of like communication as two separate things, that like some people have more integrated and some people have more segregated. And now I find myself just like reflecting on that. And I feel so weird going like on this ramble. I'm sorry.
No,
Oh, it's good. You're good.
You're good.
I was just gonna say, Lori had said something earlier called the power of the pause, and as you were saying that, I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
that is the power of the pause that she demonstrated right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of it though. Like I'm like, I wouldn't have thought about that. And now, Angelica, you got me thinking like I'm gonna start like really analyzing how these people in leadership roles are speaking and what they use.
Because, right now, how I look at it is like, although we are working as educators, whether that be interventionists or teachers, or I don't know if there's any assistant principals, we are we have an opportunity to always absorb and be sponges towards our leaders, especially leaders we look up to, because
Mhm.
like when else would you get the opportunity to learn in that context? Like, so I feel like anytime you're in their presence, like I'm always analyzing them. I'm like, how are they addressing this? How are they like, because there are so many different situations that come up for them. And, most of the time we're in our classrooms or we're off to the side and we don't get to see that. So
Mhm.
Reading about the cardinal values and just how they're universal. I think that was really interesting for me to see.
I like the cross culture. Like I remember high school or probably and I think it was college, we had to read stuff on um Aristotle and Confucian, and it was
Mhm.
so confusing. But I think this article really made more sense having that background, and did a really good job of putting it in a more friendly language,
Hmm.
to help you understand more what was going on. Um, and honestly, the graphs really did help. So I really appreciate kind of looking at those graphs because it just made it more sense of what they were talking about. But I think for me, my takeaway is just kind of similar to like yours, Raphael, like that I'm seeing more of some of these things that I'm already doing as a teacher with my students
Mm.
that then I can kind of continue practicing, but also then kind of looking at which ones do I want to in more practice in, like, or that I could see myself being more towards than another, or what I want to introduce into my leadership style.
Awesome.
That wraps up the
Mhm.
questions for the article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we
Do we
talk about some maybe
Yeah,
the
which one?
videos or
Which one?
you want to talk about the Robert Keegan video, the further reaches of adult development? Let's see. No, wait, was that?
That was from last week. No?
Yeah, okay, so I'm looking at all my notes
Oh
here.
yeah, there. Yes, the asynchronous videos.
Oh, here
I
we
did
go.
not see that
Discussion.
one. Yeah. I went to the article first, not
Yeah.
seeing that. So yeah, so it says, what concrete demonstrations of trust and respect do you think would be most important to instructional knowers? This is from the creating the culture of capacity building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For that one, I said setting clear expectations and consistent feedback, and then just like following through on all our commitments and promises that we make, and then having some tangible achievements.
Yeah, there was a chart in the presentation that had like all of this, and it said like verbal acknowledgments, rewards for successful importance. So this is what you said, clear, consistent expectations. Yeah.
Mine, what I put was keeping it simple and clear. Like it's very easy to, like, I know I've done it bad with my kids sometimes where I'm like, oh, we're gonna do this, 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 and this, and this, and this. And then I only do like three of them, and then they call me out on it. I'll be like, "Oh, well, I didn't say now. I said later." And I'm like, I'm losing trust because of that.
Yeah.
So I become an overachiever, and I end up, it comes back to bite me. So keeping it simple, something that I definitely need to work on, so that you can definitely achieve what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I think I'm definitely the same, Raphael. I put such high expectations of like getting through so much things that then I tell them this is what we're doing, and then it falls short exactly what you. But then also like that follow through with, expectations. And that's still something that I'm in my fourth year in fourth grade. And I still feel like that's a struggle. And I think that's where, you build those expectations and that trust and respect then comes with it. And it's that follow through, that follow through is so important.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's just so many things, but I do also think though that kind of leads also into curiosity a little bit, just because that is kind of using different things that we have nowadays.
Yeah.
I
Get carried
to
away
go
on
back
curiosity.
to go back to the reading though, I did feel like, it was going through all the what's a cardinal virtue, and they like described all the research, and then they narrowed it down. And then when they went into the leadership styles, I was like, man, I was like trying to make like a really like condensed note on each like style, and I was like, wow, I'm writing down every single virtue again. Like, wow, these all have all of them. What is like what's distinguishing them from, I mean, no, like some of the things were, but and then at the end of the article, they're like, yeah, so we found that all of these virtues were in like all of the leadership styles. And I'm like, why didn't we say that in the beginning when I was, before I started writing everything down? But it makes sense. I mean, a lot of these things overlap, and like it makes sense that a lot of the key, like the cardinal virtues that they did identify, like at the end as the ones they were going to use.
Yeah.
That all those
leadership styles have that because those are like essential for like leadership. So
Yeah, and it really helps you like dive deeper into those virtues because now we're all filling out the surveys and writing our papers on that. So it really like helps you to determine like where are you with these virtues and how do other people see you and what areas do you really need to grow in and what areas do you feel like you might be.
I have really enjoyed getting to look at myself like at a deeper level. Like I've always enjoyed that type of stuff, just like growing up, but I really liked because I took the whatever we took last week during class, I did it
Oh, the
this weekend.
quiz.
Yeah, I did it this weekend because I missed that part of class. And I just was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like I would see myself higher here. But then when I look back at these questions, like, okay, I actually don't do that well with this. And so I think it's like important to look at that too to see, okay, maybe this is why I struggle when I'm in this type of meeting or when I'm communicating with this person because I'm really not, you know what I mean? Like seeing things from a different view and like a different perspective. And so I've really liked getting to see that because I've been catching myself now when I'm having conversations being like, wait a second, I got to think about this from a different perspective, a different view. Because again, I keep going back to curiosity, but I think it's just being like open like that and having an open mind right now and thinking like, okay, what is this person feeling? Why don't I think about it from this way? So I've really enjoyed going through all of the strengths, the virtues, the leadership styles. And there's
I
so many.
bet yeah, I can relate to that. I feel like I'm trying to be more mindful as well, especially
Mhm.
like in meetings and really trying to process the information first and think about like the problem more deeply. And then I don't know if you guys have started to notice, but I never noticed it before, but now I'm noticing when like my coworkers are making a judgment statement and I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. Like, let's think about this. Wait, you know,
No,
kind of
completely.
like kind of like when
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, he won't do it." And you're like, "Won't or can't?" You know, you're like, I have questions." But
That
yeah,
was
now
in
I'm
one
a
of
little
the
more
Sorry to interrupt. That was in one of the lecture. I think it was in your lecture. When you're
Yeah.
curious, are you asking questions to know more information, or are you asking questions to get more information in a judging matter?
Mhm.
And I've been really that like sat with me because I think we can all be guilty whether we think or acknowledge the fact and just so I've been very cognizant of myself and others and um just about curiosity and just having those preconceived feelings about things or thinking a certain way and then having that affect the way that I might look at a problem.
Yeah. Hang on to that. It's going to be important.
Yeah, I think as a life skill too.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Heard would help. Um, but that one was a hard question though to interpret entirely.
I love, Lauren, how you mentioned listening.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like, I think that can often be overlooked. And I think you're spot on. I think these people who see the world in black and white, they, at the bare minimum, want to be heard,
Hmm.
right? And then, like, after they're heard, I think that then they would be more open to
Yeah.
reflecting on their own practice versus being told, like, in one aspect, I think sometimes as teachers, like, we do want clear directions, but then we sometimes do like some autonomy. And so I feel like in this instrumental knowers, I think that like having them reflect and listening to like their concerns, if they
Hmm.
had any, I think that's how you could develop like respect and trust.
That was one thing that my in my leadership aspirational interview, that was the thing that my assistant principal kept pointing out. He's like, people just want to be heard at the end of the day. It's and that's how I try to um, because there's so many problems in a day, there's so many things going on that if people are just heard, that they feel a lot happier at least that you listen to them.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes with like back to like validating their feelings and
Hmm.
even just like understanding like I know this is going to be challenging. Like I understand that the tasks you have to do, as we work together on this, like it's going to be hard and I understand that, but that's why we're here to support you. Like I don't know, just for example of that could to kind of have them feel comfortable and kind of bring in that comfort of knowing like, okay, you see that it's challenging or, I'm a little uneasy because it's maybe not a black and white thing that we have to do, but we're in it together kind of thing. So, um, definitely, I think about that and kind of like what you guys were saying, just like being acknowledged too.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just kind of add something to like what Angelica said because I think about it in like the love languages and I think about the quality time just because this is actually something that's happening within like my own department. There are some of my individuals where like we have like these extra meetings and sometimes there's a lot of a social piece and everyone's kind of running around trying to get things done. So I think about like instrumental would be more like direct, like, hey, these are the 3, 4, 5 points that we're going to hit today. Like, and I think with them, with specifically some of my colleagues, it's like they don't really want to engage in the socialization. Like they want like respect my time, value my time, tell me exactly what you need me to know, and then going back to like, but also allow me that autonomy, right, and allow me choice, right, where I think that's where we're kind of having a little bit like I see my department chair like having to deal with that because like we had to get the union involved, where it's just like there's so much time that is like there's so little of time that we have, but there's so much time that is being spent on maybe like the socialization piece that they're like, what does this have to do with like what I need to get done? Right.
Hmm.
So I think with them, it's just more like, hey, for these first 15 minutes, we're going to go over the specific things that you need to know. And then afterwards, let's add a little bit more of that extra things. So really valuing like their time, right? And what is quality to that? Because it talks about being like clear and concise with them, right? And I think that goes a long way to some people who really are just very, they're not gray thinkers. They're just black or white, for example.
Hmm.
Well,
I
I
think a lot
feel
of,
like you like lend us perfectly into the next question.
Yeah,
Like,
A different expectation. Um, I come from a district where we were micromanaged by our district stating that like you had to do this lesson this week and this day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you fell behind, they would know because we were doing data chats. And if we weren't on the specific lesson, like it was noted. So when I came to the school that I'm at and things were going a lot slower than what I was used to, I kind of accidentally got way too far ahead of the rest of my team. But they actually like that. So we work together to kind of see how we can speed up the curriculum, and we were doing more than we were normally doing. Um, and I didn't do it in a way, apparently, this was from them, that I made them feel like less or anything like that. It was just more like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing it. Let's see what he was doing and worked on it. And they said that's kind of how I am as a teammate, where it's like go with the flow, but feel comfortable enough to say something or do something. But that's what he said.
Yeah. Okay. I said I think they would agree that I create an environment of trust, safety, and respect. I, I didn't know how else to really say that. I just think that they would agree. I mean, we actually all do in our team. We share our ideas. We speak kindly about each other. We don't criticize. So I think it's easy to be that way when everybody in the group is like that. When you have one or two people that are not like that, then you start to get your guard up and that environment is, I mean, it's the phrase just popped in my head about, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody on your team needs to be exhibiting the trust, safety, and respect for it to really be effective. Mhm.
Yeah, I think it was hard to think about this one personally and not like as a team because we're so used to working on teams. So I said something that our team does a really good job of is like being really intentional and consistent and reflective. So like at the end of the day, like coming together and asking, well, what can we improve on tomorrow? Or did it go so well today? Or what went well today? And using that as like kind of a guide for the next few days.
And then, so then moving on to the intellectual virtues of critical thinking curiosity video. So the first question is, do you ask these questions when faced with a situation that requires critical thinking? So the question is, what is the purpose, goal, or point? What is the problem or issue being solved or described? On what data or evidence is the decision slash definition slash problem based? And what inferences are being made from what kind of data? And are these inferences legitimate? So I can definitely for sure say for myself, the last two or last three, the problem, what evidence data, and like inf inferencing that data, is definitely what will continuously ask myself when faced with like a critical thinking problem. Um, I really don't think when I was thinking about this, when I read it or watching the video and listening to it, like, I don't think I've ever asked myself what the goal or the point of this question is. I think I automatically go to, okay, how am I going to solve this? And what data do I have or evidence do I have to back up this decision? And and kind of thinking back on some things that I've done just this year, and the problem didn't get solved the way I was hoping. And like, well, could it have been different if I had asked, well, what's the point of this question? Or what is my end goal in
Hmm.
order to make it a stronger decision?
Yeah, I don't think I cognizantly ask myself these questions either. But I think that probably not either is because I'm not implying that you don't. Um, I wrote yes to each one of these questions except for the last one, but I don't think it's a cognizant, okay, what's the problem and what do I need to solve? I think it's just you just go forward and you try to solve a problem. Um, but I don't think I do much of the inferences, like what inferences are being made from what kind of data, and are these inferences legitimate? I don't think I think about the inferences. I think I think more in black and white.
We've filled out surveys, not sure where they're going though.
See,
Yeah.
so it talks about kind of related to this too. It's like, are you inspired at work?
Yes.
Do you feel valued at work? Do you feel like your supervisor, this, and this? Do you feel like you have the things you need to succeed?
Are you
Do you feel
growing?
like
Are
you
you
could
learning?
grow?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's unfortunate you guys don't really get the results. So we get like they show us the results in a few different ways. We talk about it in like our smaller um building team meetings, and then we also use that data. I'm on the committee that's we're trying to take some of that data and like pick goals based on that.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say I've seen it, the results. Kristen just I met
Yeah,
every
I think they sent it to us, but it didn't seem like, I don't know. It didn't seem
mine
like
was
meaning was put into it.
I
But
agree. I saw it because of I was working on the SIP.
yeah,
So like that's kind of where I saw it. But it is,
yeah.
I mean, it really is interesting though, because you're like diving into what everyone is feeling. And that's so important also as a leader to see these things and grow from it. But I feel like sometimes we take these things and it's just thrown into the garbage and like no one is taking a deeper look. I know, Lindsay, you were saying like you guys, but I feel like there could be more sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think in a larger district, sometimes it is hard because
Mhm.
there's just so many schools and so many systems.
Yeah.
And like, I do feel like systems and processes are put in front of people for being people, and it's harder. But I don't know. I feel like that's something that is needs to change.
Yeah. But I think that's I mean, I like going into the leadership side of things because that's always something we could do. And I think
Yeah.
that's looking at it again. I know it's different when you're at a principal level compared to like a district level, depending on who's making those changes. But like, could you do it within your own building? And I like looking at it
Right.
from that side of things.
I do feel like there are some changes that my principal, because now I feel like in taking this course and looking at these virtues, I just I feel like I look at it through a different lens. And I do feel like I'm able to identify like these are the problem, this is what's happening. What can we do to fix this? And I just had
Yeah.
a conversation with like one of our math coaches today about like this is what's happening for us. It's an MTSS problem that we feel like we have all of these students that need to be identified, and we do suspect disabilities. So with Child Find, we need to identify them. But our school psychologist is just so bogged down with so many evaluations that she's like, I can't do this right now. Maybe in the spring, maybe this.
Yes.
But we were saying like that's if you suspect a disability, you can't say, oh, I don't have time. Like that shouldn't be the answer. It should be we need to do an evaluation so we can gather more information.
Which happens so often. Like I get kids thrown at the table just because they're like, man, it's not that big of a worry.
Yeah, and
So
it's just a
concerning.
resource issue, but also like a systems issue.
I say it's a
Um,
big systems issue.
and it's like I don't know what the answer is to that if you don't have the resources. It kind of brings us back to that ethical dilemma from last week
Yeah.
of like we don't have the staffing to do some of the things that we know are best practice. And in that case, as a leader, what do you do when you don't have the staff and you don't have the people, and then your people are just getting burnt out and your staff is just feeling defeated and morale's going down? Like, what do you do as a leader to uplift them? So I'm guessing,
Yeah.
Dr. Spielman, this is something that we're going to see as another ethical dilemma coming up.
I think it's a real life one that, yeah, you'll be dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
have a
good.
Safety and respect. It's not just about um, them. It's not about them. I don't want to say punishing, but like them trying to tell you what you did wrong. It's them trying to understand the scenario. So like trust is
Mhm.
maybe understanding. Safety kind of falls under trust as well. I mean, the amount of times I've had conversations with telling people like I don't feel safe in a scenario, and they're just like, well, you're not getting beat up. I'm like, no, like I don't emotionally feel safe. And
Yeah.
it sounds like your administrators made you emotionally feel safe. And I think that that's like a big thing with being a leader is making people feel safe enough to come to you and not think that you're going to get on them about something that they did wrong, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. And really, like every single year we teach, it's a whole new set of kids. It's a whole new set of like routines, expectations, and also just learning about the kids. And like Angelica, your situation, another kid could have taken that scenario very differently and there could have been no issue whatsoever. But I think it's just like feeling like you can fail is part of safety and respect as well. Like respecting that people are still learning, respecting that people are that I'm just like I don't know. I'm somebody else take the floor, please.
Yeah, no, Lauren, I feel like you're like spot on.
Yeah.
I think that I never even thought about it like that. I never even thought that like my administrator was making me feel emotionally safe. Right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I always think about safety in terms of like physicality. Like,
Hmm.
are we all physically safe? But you're so spot on. It's not just being listened and heard, it's about and not just being validated. It truly is emotionally safe, like feeling like you can go to any like specific person, right? Because those people will, I think number one, they believe in your goodness. Like
Hmm.
they know they know your roots, they know who you are, and then like two, they are supporting you as you go
Yeah.
through your journey, as you continue to learn, because as you said, like we all make mistakes, right?
Mhm.
We sometimes we can overlook things or say things in ways that we're like, we probably should have said this a little differently. And then
Mhm.
also sometimes I feel like, especially now, we are challenged with having to remind ourselves that each person that we're communicating with will interpret things a little differently. And so then as you become like a refined educator, you like you take that into consideration when you're
Mhm.
working with certain colleagues or certain administrators or certain students. Like what you can say with one student, you might not be able to get away with saying to another. And
Mhm.
like one student might need you to redirect them a little sternly, while another might need something much more gentle. So it's like reading a room, but also like reading your people, knowing your people. I feel like really good leaders have that. They know that.
Yeah. I mean, like today and the reason why, like, I think about intellectual and emotional safety so much is because I teach social studies. And like today we talked about what happened with Emmett Till, for instance. So like before we had talked about that, like we always do like this intellectual safety conversation between like any hard conversation we have to have, saying like we understand that like people's perspectives are different. We understand that people are, I mean, like it's this whole routine and this whole slideshow that they are so used to at this point. But it really like then makes me think about like who do I feel like mentally safe with? Who can I mentally go to and not feel judged? And my administration's done a great job at making me feel safe, but also because they respect me so much. There was an incident, I don't, it had to have been last year. I had these historical memes on my wall that were just like the kids loved them, and a substitute had seen them. They were offended by some of them. And so my administration had come up to me and just like, listen, you're not in trouble, but like, we're curious, like, why she might have thought this. And I said, well, like, some of them are like, they're Civil War memes. And it was trying, and like, it was funny though, because when kids, like, when we had covered over the Civil War, kids were like, I get that now. And they were able to connect to it. And the administration was like, we love that, but you will have to take them down. And I was like, that's fine. That's not a big deal. And like, even so, I had a lot of kids questioning me about it. And I had brought it up to them, and they're like, send them to me and I will talk to them for you. So you don't even have to talk to them about it. And I was like, the fact that like you're even offering to do that is amazing. Like, you're not forcing it on me to explain what happened.
Bye.
You're the only one back?
We all said bye.
There. Hello. Camila was
Hello.
she was on her own.
I know, I was
Yeah.
nervous. I was like, wait.
No, I'm stuck with her alone.
I don't like that it's so dark already.
I know. Mm,
I feel like as I've gotten older, it's been hard to get used to the time change. I don't know why, but
It just bothers me that we hear every year we hear conversations about it's going to change and we're not going to do it, and then
yeah,
it just gets lost in again. So
because I think some counties in Indiana don't even follow it.
yeah, and I know the state of Arizona doesn't follow it.
Yeah.
Communicate with colleagues there, and I always have to check my phone. What time is it there? Because it's always different. So
Mhm.
yeah, and then even I have a lot of cousins in England and Ireland, and they change on different weeks.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
when I was doing that master's program at the University of Birmingham online, there was always a couple of weeks in the fall and a couple of weeks in the winter when everybody was confused as to what time we were supposed to be on because it was just,
that's
they
interesting.
changed that, we changed that, so it was crazy for a while, but it's all part of it. So any great aha moments, any super things you want to share with the whole group? Anything that was interesting or enlightening or terrible and you hated it besides the hard article to read?
I'll share. I feel like we really had a great conversation. Like we talked and answered questions and we're talking about curiosity and virtues and we kind of like linked it back to what is going on in our school present day and talked about just like some ethical issues and just related it back to just everyday life working in the schools. And it was just like a really great, meaningful conversation. And I think that we all got a lot out of just hearing each other and being sounding boards for each other and kind of giving each other some advice about things.
That's what it's all about, building this community because you guys are going to be best buddies for the next 20 months. So you're going to hold hands for a long time together. That's important. That's good to see. Thank you for sharing. Anything else? Hmm.
Um, I didn't get to ask this question, but related to the readings, when they talked about the charismatic leader, um, I thought about like, I feel like there's charismatic leaders that don't have like the virtues that they listed. Like what happens when charisma goes wrong, I guess, is what I was kind of thinking when I read about that section and like they don't have these virtues to keep them in, like making ethical decisions.
And yeah, it's interesting because the first time I read that article, which is now probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was kind of struck by the positive tone for charismatic leadership, because in my mind, I always go back to who was the guy in South America where they all drank the Kool-Aid, where he was so charismatic and everybody followed him and they all killed themselves, right? Um, but I think it comes back to the fact that all of these leadership styles have virtues that are associated with them. But right, remember, virtues can be vices or virtues, right? So there is an advantage to being a charismatic leader if you're using them with a moral compass and you're using them appropriately and maybe applying practical wisdom as to how you use them, because people will follow someone who's charismatic, especially if they're appealing to them on many levels. But like you said, people, I mean, Hitler was one of the most charismatic rulers ever, right? People were just following him like crazy. But then you had people like John Kennedy and Barack Obama who had a lot of charisma, but used it in the right directions. So it really is that moral compass and that idea of the golden mean, making sure that regardless of your style, there might be times when you need to be kind of charismatic to get people to follow you, right? But yeah, yeah, thank you for Jim Jones. That's the name. I couldn't think of it. You're good. Um, but it's true, and it is important to think that there are all of these different leadership styles, and when and how and if you use them is really contextually important. Yeah. And each of our modules, when you go into the ethical dilemma section, there's PDF in there of leadership styles that's even many, many more than we've talked about so far. Other comments? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the presentation, do a couple of minutes of the presentation because there's a point not too far in where you're going to pause and you're going to go out and do another self-assessment. So that'll be a good time to take our break. Is that okay with you? We do it that way? Okay. So let me share my screen. So how many of you, before I start, how many of you are a fan of Dr. Brene Brown? Okay. How many of you have never heard of her? Okay. And okay, so this is going to be fun. It's going to be interesting because we're going to be talking a lot tonight about her, and in particular, one of the books that she wrote that was called Dare to Lead. So one of the things that I think is important to know about her is that she's a research professor, right? She's actually, I think, social work is her area. Um, and she's at the University of Houston, and she also holds a seat at the University of Texas School of Business, which is kind of interesting. But she studies leadership in so many different ways. She's been probably researching now for well over 25 years. And when she talks about looking at leadership, she always looks at courage, vulnerability, and then she also researches on shame and empathy, which really gives her an interesting lens. She has written numerous New York Times bestsellers. I think the ones that I have here are The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, Braving the Wilderness, Dare to Lead, Atlas of the Heart, and I actually just got in the mail a couple of weeks ago her latest one that I haven't even cracked open yet. That's going to be over the winter break. But her writings are very easy reads, but also based in a lot of research. So what I'd like you to do right now is I'm going to think about this question. Okay, what are the specific skills that you think would underpin someone who exhibits brave and courageous leadership? What does it look like if someone is a brave leader or a courageous leader? And what I'm going to ask you to do is to put your response in the chat, just so we can kind of have a quick kind of loop around of what people are thinking. Want me to put those questions in the chat? Just put them in there for those of you that need it. Okay. Hold themselves high. Reflects vulnerability. Admit when they need help, when they're wrong, takes risks, or even confidence. Yeah. Acknowledge making a mistake. That's huge. Huge. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Interesting. That's great. So one of the things that Brene Brown would talk about, let's see if I can go back to. She talks a lot about emotions and the experiences that give meaning to our lives, okay? One of the things that she really has done is she's worked with a lot of transformative leaders and teams, and she's worked with people in schools and hospitals and business all around the world. And she has really found that it's kind of interesting because most of the time people ask her questions and say, how do you cultivate brave leaders? And how do you cultivate daring leaders? And how do you embed courage um, into that whole situation? I love the way she talks about the fact that leadership isn't about titles necessarily, because you can lead from wherever you are. But it's about putting yourself out there. And she talks really heavily in her book about the importance of having the courage to lead. So think for a minute, what is a leader? just jot down in your notes what you think right now for you to define what would you say a leader is? I love her definition. She says that a leader, as you can see on the screen, is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and in processes and has the courage to develop that. She talks about this very strongly. And I love the quote on the left-hand side where she talks about you can use courage or you can choose comfort, but you really can't choose both. And I think that's a powerful statement because I think many times leaders have to think about, do I want the comfortable, easy way in this situation? Do I just want to be, make it nice and easy? Or do I have the courage to kind of take a grip and do what is really necessary and needs to be done? Um, so one of the things that she talks about is that you can look at, and we talked a little bit about this when you did the VIA, okay? When you talk about the different strengths of courage. And you did that VII last week. So there were like 6 categories, and then there were also all the other strengths that were listed underneath them. And if you study this particular handbook, it talks about bravery and persistence and integrity and vitality as those 4 things being strengths that actually go along with courage. And they talk about it in a way that, we've got bravery, which is kind of your historical, someone who acts with valor. Persistence, finishing what you've started, staying on task, achieving closure. That's certainly a strength for someone who's courageous. Integrity, taking responsibility, an internal sense of being a morally coherent human being. And then interesting, they put vitality in there because that's important to have enthusiasm and energy, and especially when there are difficult and draining situations that are happening. So Brene talks about the fact that in her book, Daring Leadership, that it can be taught, it can be caught, and it can be sought. She says there are 4 skills that are 100% teachable that leaders can learn. And she breaks them into categories that are called rumbling with vulnerability, living into your values and virtues, braving trust, and learning to rise. We're only going to look at a little bit of this tonight because her book is very long and very involved, and we aren't going to have the time to do all of that. But before we do anything, I'm going to ask you to take an assessment, okay? So what we're going to do is you're going to go to our module, and you'll see in our module a link to, let me see if I can share it with you. You'll see a link to the Daring Leadership Assessment. I'll share my screen so you can see where it's at. It's in module number 4. It's in the presentation materials, and it's right here underneath Leading with Courage and Vulnerability, which is the PowerPoint I'm using this evening, and right here, the Daring Leadership Assessment. So what I'd like you to do, let's take about a 10-ish minute break. It's 6:12. We'll come back at 6:25. We'll give you a 13-minute break. How's that? Take the assessment. Make sure that you follow her directions. So just turn off your camera, take the assessment, take a break, and we'll come back together at 6:25. Welcome back. So any thoughts about that assessment? Any reactions? Any comments?
I never would have associated the word rumbling with vulnerability.
I think that's a real Brene viewpoint and perspective. She's got a very earthy vocabulary, and she likes to do that. It's funny, but it is true. Yeah, she talks about rumbling and a lot of getting into it. So I think maybe that's part of her being a Texas girl as well. So anything that you found that was helpful, helping you in your self-assessment, your reflections, your self-awareness, anything that came out of it that we found interesting, beneficial, terrible, horrible?
I
I
like the
think
She
Oh,
worded things. Sorry, Megan.
no, you're good. You go.
I like the way that she worded like the score breakdown. Like you have strengths here. Like this is like one of like your big strengths, and then the strengths and opportunities for growth, and even like the less than five being just like you have solid opportunities for growth is such a like even though it's for growth, it's a positive way of looking at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think she masters that most of the time. She's pretty good with that.
I was gonna say the same thing too, because I feel like we always talk to students about that, too, always kind of leading with the positives too. I liked the area of the braving trust because I feel like trust can be a lot of you can look at it from a lot of different ways. And I like that it brought boundaries into there as well. The accountability, non-judgment, the integrity. Like I liked how it included all of that right into trust. I think that's always a place that can be built on. And I think sometimes it can be really hard in like our day and age and how easy it is to just get in contact with anybody. And so I kind of liked that question of like, do you always or not talk, kind of behind someone's back and kind of leading into that. And I really liked getting to kind of reflect on that area.
And it flows nicely from some of the conversations you had the first hour today when you were
Yes.
talking about
Yeah.
safety and trust and respect and that safety, that psychological safety is huge. That's the number one criteria that's important for the success of teams and things like that. So how many of you have seen Brene Brown's TED Talk? Oh, two or three. Okay, you guys can take a nap then because we're going to show it. Though I will have to say that I've watched it probably about a dozen times, and I always come away feeling uplifted and feeling like I've learned something new. So let me see if I can do this without getting too showing you how bad I am with technology here. We'll see. All right. I think we can do this.
So I'll start with this. A couple of years ago, an event planner called me because I was going to do a speaking event. And she called and she said, I'm really struggling with how to write about you on the little flyer. And I thought, well, what's the struggle? And she said, well, I saw you speak and I'm going to call you a researcher, I think, but I'm afraid if I call you a researcher, no one will come because they'll think you're boring and irrelevant. And I was like, okay. And she said, but the thing I liked about your talk is, you're a storyteller. So I think what I'll do is just call you a storyteller. And of course, the academic insecure part of me was like, you're going to call me a what? And she said, I'm going to call you a storyteller. And I was like, oh, why not Magic Pixie? I was like, I don't, let me think about this for a second. And so I tried to call deep on my courage. And I thought, I am a storyteller. I'm a qualitative researcher. I collect stories. That's what I do. And maybe stories are just data with a soul, and maybe I'm just a storyteller. So I said, you know what? Why don't you just say I'm a researcher storyteller? And she went, there's no such thing. So I'm a researcher storyteller. And I'm going to talk to you today. We're talking about expanding perception. And so I want to talk to you and tell some stories about a piece of my research that fundamentally expanded my perception and really actually changed the way that I live and love and work and parent. And this is where my story starts. When I was a young researcher, doctoral student, my first year, I had a research professor who said to us, here's the thing. If you cannot measure it, it does not exist. And I thought he was just sweet talking me. I was like, really? And he's like, absolutely. So you have to understand that I have a bachelor's in social work, a master's in social work, and I was getting my PhD in social work. So my entire academic career was surrounded by people who kind of believed in the life's messy, love it, and I'm more the life's messy, clean it up, organize it, and put it into a bento box. And so to think that I had found my way, to found a career that takes me, really one of the big sayings in social work is lean into the discomfort of the work. And I'm like, knock discomfort upside the head and move it over and get all A's. That was my mantra. So I was very excited about this. And so I thought, you know what? This is the career for me because I am interested in some messy topics, but I want to be able to make them not messy. I want to understand them. I want to hack into these things that I know are important and lay the code out for everyone to see. So where I started was with connection, because by the time you're a social worker for 10 years, what you realize is that connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. This is what it's all about. It doesn't matter whether you talk to people who work in social justice and mental health and abuse and neglect. What we know is that connection, the ability to feel connected, is neurobiologically, that's how we're wired. It's why we're here. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to start with connection. Well, you know that situation where you get an evaluation from your boss and she tells you 37 things that you do really awesome and one thing that you can't, an opportunity for growth. And all you can think about is that opportunity for growth, right? Well, apparently this is the way my work went as well, because when you ask people about love, they tell you about heartbreak. When you ask people about belonging, they'll tell you their most excruciating experiences of being excluded. And when you ask people about connection, the stories they told me were about disconnection. So very quickly, really about 6 weeks into this research, I ran into this unnamed thing that absolutely unraveled connection in a way that I didn't understand or had never seen. And so I pulled back out of the research and thought, I need to figure out what this is. And it turned out to be shame. And shame is really easily understood as the fear of disconnection. Is there something about me that if other people know it or see it, that I won't be worthy of connection? The things I can tell you about it, it's universal. We all have it. The only people who don't experience shame have no capacity for human empathy or connection. No one wants to talk about it, and the less you talk about it, the more you have it. What underpinned this shame, this I'm not good enough, which we all know that feeling. I'm not blank enough. I'm not thin enough, rich enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, promoted enough. The thing that underpinned this was excruciating vulnerability. This idea of, in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, really seen. And you know how I feel about vulnerability. I hate vulnerability. And so I thought, this is my chance to beat it back with my measuring stick. I'm going in, I'm going to figure this stuff out. I'm going to spend a year. I'm going to totally deconstruct shame. I'm going to understand how vulnerability works, and I'm going to outsmart it. So I was ready, and I was really excited. As you know, it's not going to turn out well. You know this. So I could tell you a lot about shame, but I'd have to borrow everyone else's time. But here's what I can tell you that it boils down to. And this may be one of the most important things that I've ever learned in the decade of doing this research. My 1 year has turned into 6 years, thousands of stories, hundreds of long interviews, focus groups. At one point, people were sending me journal pages and sending me their stories, thousands of pieces of data. In 6 years. And I kind of got a handle on it. I kind of understood this is what shame is, this is how it works. I wrote a book, I published a theory, but something was not okay. And what it was is that if I roughly took the people I interviewed and divided them into people who really have a sense of worthiness, that's what this comes down to, a sense of worthiness. They have a strong sense of love and belonging. And folks who struggle for it, and folks who are always wondering if they're good enough. There was only one variable that separated the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging and the people who really struggle for it, and that was the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe they're worthy of love and belonging. That's it. They believe they're worthy. And to me, the hard part of the one thing that keeps us out of connection is our fear that we're not worthy of connection, was something that personally and professionally I felt like I needed to understand better. So what I did is I took all of the interviews where I saw worthiness, where I saw people living that way, and just looked at those. What do these people have in common? And I have a slight office supply addiction, but it's another talk. So I had a manila notebook, a manila folder, and I had a Sharpie. And I was like, what am I going to call this research? And the first words that came to my mind were wholehearted. These are kind of wholehearted people living from this deep sense of worthiness. So I wrote at the top of the manila folder, and I started looking at the data. In fact, I did it first in this in a 4-day, very intensive data analysis where I went back, pulled these interviews, pulled the stories, pulled the incidents. What's the theme? What's the pattern? My husband left town with the kids because I always go into this kind of Jackson Pollock crazy thing where I'm just like writing and going and kind of just in my researcher mode. And so here's what I found. What they had in common was a sense of courage. And I want to separate courage and bravery for you for a minute. Courage, the original definition of courage, when it first came into the English language, it's from the Latin word cur, meaning heart. And the original definition was to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. And so these folks had, very simply, the courage to be imperfect. They had the compassion to be kind to themselves first and then to others, because as it turns out, we can't practice compassion with other people if we can't treat ourselves kindly. And the last was they had connection, and this was the hard part, as a result of authenticity. They were willing to let go of who they thought they should be in order to be who they were, which is, you have to absolutely do that for connection. The other thing that they had in common was this. They fully embraced vulnerability. They believed that what made them vulnerable made them beautiful. They didn't talk about vulnerability being comfortable, nor did they really talk about it being excruciating, as I had heard earlier in the shame interviewing. They just talked about it being necessary. They talked about the willingness to say, I love you first. The willingness to do something where there are no guarantees. The willingness to breathe through waiting for the doctor to call after your mammogram. The willing to invest in a relationship that may or may not work out. They thought this was fundamental. I personally thought it was betrayal. I could not believe I had pledged allegiance to research, where our job, the definition of research is to control and predict, to study phenomenon for the explicit reason to control and predict. And now my mission to control and predict had turned up the answer that the way to live is with vulnerability and to stop controlling and predicting. This led to a little breakdown, which actually looked more like this. And it did. It led to I call it a breakdown. My therapist calls it a spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening sounds better than breakdown, but I assure you it was a breakdown. And I had to put my data away and go find a therapist. Let me tell you something. You know who you are when you call your friends and say, I think I need to see somebody. Do you have any recommendations? Because about 5 of my friends are like, woo, I wouldn't want to be your therapist. I was like, what does that mean? And they're like, I'm just saying, don't bring your measuring stick. Like, okay. So I found a therapist. My first meeting with her, Diana, I brought in my list of the way the wholehearted live. And I sat down and she said, how are you? And I said, I'm great. I'm okay. And she said, what's going on? And I said, and this is a therapist who sees therapists, because we have to go to those because their BS meters are good. And so I said, here's the thing, I'm struggling. And she said, what's the struggle? And I said, well, I have a vulnerability issue. And I know that vulnerability is kind of the core of shame and fear and our struggle for worthiness, but it appears that it's also the birthplace of joy, of creativity, of belonging, of love. And I think I have a problem. And I need some help. And I said, but here's the thing, no family stuff, no childhood shit. I just need some strategies. Thank you. So she goes like this. And then I said, it's bad, right? She said, it's neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. And I said, oh my God, this is going to suck. And it did, and it didn't. And it took about a year. And you know how there are people that, like, when they realize that vulnerability and tenderness are important, that they kind of surrender and walk into it? A, that's not me. And B, I don't even hang out with people like that. Uh, for me, it was a year-long street fight. It was a slugfest. Vulnerability pushed, I pushed back. I lost the fight, but probably won my life back. And so then I went back into the research and spent the next couple of years really trying to understand what the wholehearted, what the choices they were making, and what are we doing with vulnerability? Why do we struggle with it so much? Am I alone in struggling with vulnerability? No. So this is what I learned. We numb vulnerability. When we're waiting for the call, it was funny. I sent something out on Twitter and on Facebook that says, how would you define vulnerability? What makes you feel vulnerable? And within an hour and a half, I had 150 responses. Because I wanted to know, what's out there. Having to ask my husband for help because I'm sick and we're newly married. Initiating sex with my husband, initiating sex with my wife. Being turned down, asking someone out, waiting for the doctor to call back, getting laid off, laying off people. This is the world we live in. We live in a vulnerable world. And one of the ways we deal with it is we numb vulnerability. And I think there's evidence, and it's not the only reason this evidence exists, but I think that it's a huge cause. We are the most in debt, obese, addicted, and medicated adult cohort in US history. The problem is, and I learned this from the research, that you cannot selectively numb emotion. You can't say, here's the bad stuff. Here's vulnerability, here's grief, here's shame, here's fear, here's disappointment. I don't want to feel these. I'm going to have a couple of beers and a banana nut muffin. I don't want to feel these. And I know that's knowing laughter. I hack into your lives for a living. I know that's God. You can't numb those hard feelings without numbing the other affects or emotions. You cannot selectively numb. So when we numb those, we numb joy. We numb gratitude. We numb happiness. And then we are miserable and we are looking for purpose and meaning. And then we feel vulnerable. So then we have a couple of beers and a banana nut muffin. And it becomes this dangerous cycle. One of the things that I think that we need to think about is why and how we numb. And it doesn't just have to be addiction. The other thing we do is we make everything that's uncertain certain. Religion has gone from a belief in faith and mystery to certainty. I'm right, you're wrong, shut up. That's it. Just certain. The more afraid we are, the more vulnerable we are, the more afraid we are. This is what politics looks like today. There's no discourse anymore. There's no conversation. There's just blame. You know how blame is described in the research? A way to discharge pain and discomfort. We perfect. If there's anyone who wants their life to look like this, it would be me. But it doesn't work because what we do is we take fat from our butts and put it in our cheeks. which just, I hope in 100 years, people will look back and go, wow. And we perfect most dangerously our children. Let me tell you what we think about children. They're hardwired for struggle when they get here. When you hold those perfect little babies in your hand, our job is not to say, look at her, she's perfect. My job is just to keep her perfect, make sure she makes the tennis team by 5th grade and Yale by 7th grade. That's not our job. Our job is to look and say, you know what? You're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. That's our job. Show me a generation of kids raised like that, and we'll end the problems I think that we see today. We pretend that what we do doesn't have an effect on people. We do that in our personal lives. We do that corporate, whether it's a bailout, an oil spill, a recall. We pretend like what we're doing doesn't have a huge impact on other people. I would say to companies, this is not our first rodeo, people. We just need you to be authentic and real and say, we're sorry, we'll fix it. But there's another way, and I'll leave you with this. This is what I have found: to let ourselves be seen, deeply seen, vulnerably seen. To love with our whole hearts, even though there's no guarantee. And that's really hard. And I can tell you as a parent, that's excruciatingly difficult. To practice gratitude and joy in those moments of kind of terror when we're wondering, can I love you this much? Can I believe in this as passionately? Can I be this fierce about this? Just to be able to stop and instead of catastrophizing what might happen, to say, I'm just so grateful, because to feel this vulnerable means I'm alive. And the last, which I think is probably the most important, is to believe that we're enough. Because when we work from a place, I believe, that says, I'm enough, then we stop screaming and start listening. We're kinder and gentler to the people around us, and we're kinder and gentler to ourselves. That's all I have.
Oh, any thoughts or reactions?
That was amazing. I don't, I don't have anything too deep to say other than, and I missed the preface because I was preparing my dinner. But I don't know if you shared how you were on the scales, and I don't know if you wanted to, but I was my first thing was vulnerability. And so to have her say that it's really important that you know, are vulnerable, and that was my first result was, this is what you need to work on, vulnerability. And I'm like, wow. And that makes sense. I like what she said about, if you numb one emotion, you numb all of them. You know, you can't just numb one emotion. And that was very insightful. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and it's been a while since she did that TED Talk, but I think it's still extremely relevant. I think it still speaks volumes, and I've seen it, as I said, many, many times. And I still chuckle at what she says, and I still really think deeply about what she says. And one of the things I think that's important is to remember that I think the point that you made is that you have to deal with the emotions that are involved with what we're doing, right? We can't just shut them all out, because if you shut out emotions, you shut them all out. And there's so much, that we know now with well-being and mental health, how important it is that we don't do that. And now that doesn't mean that we have to be, pouring our hearts out to strangers, or but there's as a leader, it's something that a lot of leaders see as a weakness, and it's not. But there also needs to be discretion in just, how vulnerable you will be with the people that you're in your care. Lindsay?
Yeah, the first time I saw her TED Talk, um, I actually thought about how we're all cultured into, right, like seeing vulnerability as a bad thing, like you're being weak. And then I came home and my partner, my son is 3 now, and he like fell and hurt himself and he was crying. And my partner, with the best intentions, was like, "You're okay, don't cry, you're fine, you're fine." And I was like, whoa, 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 hold on. It's okay to cry, honey. It's okay to cry. Like, I was like, whoa, 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 no, we're not doing this to him. Like, let's just, I couldn't explain were my rationale to him at the time, but even like if you think about the way we talk to our kids, like it's fine, don't cry. It's like, no, it's okay to cry. You're hurting right now. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's cultural and I think it's also generational. My people immigrated from Ireland and, they were, very poor and lived very tough lives and struggled here. And we were taught, oh, you never cry and, you tough it, stiff upper lip and just keep going, Um, and I can see that, my husband is from Ireland and um, wonderful. I love the guy. But he has trouble with vulnerability because he was raised with that very traditional, he's the baby of 9 children, right? So, he's all of his brothers and sisters, like, you got to be tough, that kind of thing to survive. And it sometimes it's sometimes funny when we are all together as a family because we've raised our kids to, show emotion and express emotion. But I can see for my husband that it's still like he's got to push to do it, and the boys just make fun of him, especially because they think, Dad, loosen up. But it's, if that's the way you are really conditioned from a very young age, it doesn't change overnight. And it's hard, I mean, my parents were the same way, you got to be very strict and tough and don't show any vulnerability. Did you want to say something, Lauren? And I think Edwin did too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say every single week I walk out of this class and I'm like, I have to tell my therapist about this because I'm like every single like I told her about how you had us ask our friends why we're friends with that or why they're friends with us and just like hearing her talk about vulnerability, like that was a big topic of conversation with us this past year. I actually see her right before this class, so it's like I'm like I get like a double whammy of therapy, I feel like every day. But like it's so true how I had like the worst year last year. My dog had an accident that left her paralyzed, and I know. And like I really struggled with being vulnerable with people because I had to go to work. I had to do this. Like, and every time like I started to show vulnerability, there were people in my life that were like, you just need to get over it. It happened. You need to get over it. And it was just, it made me feel like more of a shell of myself. And I finally started being vulnerable with people. And it's like, I feel so much better now like opening up about it, saying like how I'm feeling about just like anything going on in my life. And it's made me so much happier. It's made me feel like a much more confident person as well. So it's something that like it's so important to be vulnerable for yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Edwin, did you want to say something?
Okay. Yeah, and things that I was thinking about because like my administrator that I interviewed for my aspirations paper talked about how like that was one of the things that she grew into, like this idea of vulnerability and how significant it really is, and that's like that's something that's like very significant. But to what you were saying, like I always think about like vulnerability because I was raised in a very like machismo kind of environment, and even like bigger when it comes to contextual, where it's like it's one thing to be vulnerable with your friends and your family, but then to go into like a professional kind of setting, right, with like your colleagues or your bosses, right, and like how I guess for me, I always engage in like that, like that. I don't know, like the contemplation of like, should I be vulnerable? Should I be like developing those types of like um, more social, personal relationships, or even with like a boss or with colleagues, or is it like, do you keep it strictly business because this is still a profession, this is still an area. So I think that was like something that I was like very um, appreciative about like Brene Brown and how like vulnerability is like at its foundation level, just like it's a universal human thing, right? And how that's the key, right? We can always kind of add these other like extra layers of like professional, family, friends, gender, like culture. Um, but vulnerability is such a necessary thing, right? And I think that goes along with like as we're kind of transitioning into these leaders, to like what my leader said, right? Like learn it sooner rather than later. That vulnerability is going to get you like more change towards a positive way, that to kind of not to have that.
And it helps to build relationships, right? So, we know that leadership is really, 90% of it is relationships, right? And so, juggling that fine line and, but I think, when you create that trust and safety and respect in an environment that helps with relationships, and then you can judge, just how much you want to share. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to share your heart and soul and everything that you tell your therapist to your staff, but it does mean that you can share things in a way that come out as being empathetic and being, compassionate, that kind of thing. Well, I'm glad you like Brene Brown, and I'm glad that those of you that have seen her before didn't mind seeing her again. So, um, I never really tire of her. I think she's something that's special, and her writing is really good.
And I love her accent.
Yeah. She's a Southern girl. Yeah. Um, So one of the things that she talks about, and she loves this quote, she says that in a kind of a dark time in her life, she found this quote by Teddy Roosevelt. And I've seen this in a lot of different ways. It seems like it pops up in different places when you're looking at things. But when she talks about this, it's when you're talking about being vulnerable, it's not really about winning or losing, right? But it is connected very strongly to courageous leadership. Because if you're brave enough, often enough, we will fail. That's just important to recognize. Whether we're, just as human beings, but as leaders, if we're brave, it's going to happen, right? But the point is, you show up, right, and understand even when you can't control the outcome, you're there. And it's vulnerability is something that would be probably one of the biggest emotions that we experience when there's uncertainty and risk involved, or maybe even emotional exposure. But she talks about being in the arena, which is something that Teddy Roosevelt talked a lot about, and she thinks it's really important that we need to be clear about whose opinions matter to us, and we need to seek feedback from those people, because even if it's hard to hear, we need to be vulnerable and we need to be willing to learn. And I think sometimes that's not the easiest things to do. So, according to her research, she talks about rumbling with vulnerability, and she said you really can't get to courage without that. That courage and fear are not mutually exclusive. She talks a lot about self-awareness and self-love and how important that is. She also talks about courage being contagious, because if you cultivate a culture at work where brave, tough conversations can happen with whole hearts, then it becomes a safe place, a psychologically safe place to work. And the thing is, and I think this is really important to think about, that leaders must care for and be connected to the people that they lead. So staying very isolated, staying very pure and away and aloof is really not going to be a successful way to lead. And that's important, because sometimes the people that we are leading are hard to care about. It's hard to make those connections because we're all a little bit different. So we're going to do a little exercise that she talks about that I think is really kind of interesting. So I want you either to get a little sticky note or draw a square that, on your notepad, just something that's about that big, just about 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. And what she says, what we should do is think about just using this little space. Now you can write names or you can write initials, but I want you to write down in this little square the names or the initials of people that you absolutely trust, that you absolutely love, and who don't need you to be anything except who you really are authentically. It's a small square because you probably wouldn't have a huge list of people that fit in there. But these are the people whose opinions matter most to you. And these are the people that I think, you could reach out to and when you need something to share. But just take a moment and remember people you love, people you trust, that you don't need to be anything else with. Um, and these are the people whose opinions really matter to you. So once you've done that, just kind of give me a thumbs up that you've got that done. Okay. So think about, why did you include these people in your box? Are you surprised by anyone that you put in your box? Are you surprised by anyone you didn't put in your box? Because she'll call this your square squad. So, anybody interested in being vulnerable and sharing? You don't have to give names, just response to those questions. Be surprised by anyone you put in the box or somebody you didn't put in the box? Lindsay, you're so brave. Thank you.
I was surprised at how few names I put. I have a lot of space left in my little tiny box. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I was really struggling to think of people who hit all those things you were talking about.
Yeah.
I think this made me realize that there's also people I would have put in like over the years and how that's changed. So I was thinking like, oh, like I would, but I'm like, no, I don't. I wouldn't right now. So I think that's interesting too.
So I think like, later on when you have time to relax and think about this evening, if there's some people on your square squad, your little square, consider letting them know, expressing gratitude. I think that might be really helpful because you're probably going to lean on them as you move through your phases of life, your phases of leadership, and they may probably be the ones that you're going to need to talk to when you have some crisis in your life, professionally or personally. Those are the people you're going to reach out to and lean to. So sometimes I think we forget to say thank you, and I think gratitude is really powerful. And I love that exercise for the square squad. And just to be perfectly honest, I didn't fill up my square either. So, and that's probably a good thing. Yeah. So Renee talks a lot about vulnerability, but she says there are some myths about vulnerability that we need to kind of be careful about and think about. And she wants to try and blast these myths out of the water. And she said one of the first ones is that vulnerability is a weakness. And she absolutely doesn't agree with that. She says she cannot even imagine or come up with any examples of courage that aren't also connected to vulnerability. She said people that pretend that they don't do vulnerability are probably either acting out or shutting down, but she doesn't believe them and doesn't trust them. The fact that people sometimes say, I can go it alone, she absolutely disputes that because we're a human species, right? We are engineered and hardwired for connection. We're a social species. So no, none of us can really do that and go alone. She's talked about the fact that sometimes there are people in certain fields that feel like you can engineer things and that you can just engineer uncertainty and discomfort out of there. But that's really not true because if you don't have vulnerability, you don't have a culture then where there's trust, right? And so ethical decision making is going to be really a problem. This is kind of the chicken before the egg. Does trust come before vulnerability or does vulnerability engender trust? And we really need both, right? We need to trust to be vulnerable and we need to be vulnerable in order to build trust. So it's your chicken and egg kind of thing. And then vulnerability is disclosure. And that's something where she talks about, she's not a proponent of us oversharing and, pouring our hearts out to people. And, that if you're indiscriminate, then, you're just being vulnerable for vulnerability's sake, then no. But she does not believe you can be a daring leader without vulnerability. So we talked a little bit in the very first session in a couple of the groups. I mentioned the idea of psychological safety, which I think is an important topic to think about right now. So how many of you have heard about, just kind of raise your hand if you've heard about the Google's project that was called Aristotle. Any of you heard anything about that project that was conducted at Google? Okay. So it was probably back, they started in about 2012, but it was undertaken at Google because they wanted to look at what made teams successful, right? Because the people in Google, they work in teams intensely, right? And so they were looking to figure out, what makes a team successful. So they wanted to identify patterns and behaviors. They looked at teams that were high performing. And they spent 2 years studying this. They studied the 250 attributes of about 100 different teams. And with all of that data, they ran statistical models trying to understand. They did all of this looking at 35 or more statistical models, hundreds of variables. And they wanted to figure out, looking at qualitative and looking at quantitative, looking at the kinds of teams. And what was really interesting, because what they actually found in the end was that it really mattered less about who was on the team, and it was really about how the team worked together. Their big breakthrough was discovering that the number one thing as a critical element for a team to be effective was psychological safety. And that's that idea that, the team is a safe space for interpersonal risk taking. They actually came up with 5 particular qualities, but psychological safety was the first one. Dependability was the second one. Structure and clarity was another one. I know some of you talked about, I want to know why, what my purpose is on this, meaning, finding a sense of purpose in the work, and the impact, looking at the results of the work. So, when team members feel safe to take risks in front of each other, that's far and away the most important of all the 5 factors that they found. It makes it possible to give tough feedback and have difficult conversations in a very safe, nurturing environment. Now, this doesn't mean it's got to be a cozy, loving, environment in that sense. But it doesn't mean that you're all close friends, but it does suggest that there's an absence of pressure. So here's some of the things that happen that, let's see if I can do this. Okay, so the things that get in the way of vulnerability are things like people who are very judgmental, people who give unsolicited advice, people who interrupt others, and sharing outside of team meetings. That's one of my big bugaboos. So those are the kinds of things that can get in the way of actually having psychological safety in your team meetings, right? So, but what do we need from the teams? Okay, what we really need are, why my little thingy's not working. We need people who are listeners. We need people to stay curious. We need people to be honest. And we need people to keep confidence. This is really critical because when you start thinking about the teams that you've been on, and if they've been a really successful team and you've been able to, you knew your purpose, you knew what you were doing, you knew your charge, there was clarity, and you worked together in a, seamless way and produced what was expected from your particular team charge. The kinds of things you had were people who listened to each other, people who were curious about other people's viewpoints, people who were honest about how they felt, and who could keep their confidence. What if it was a team that didn't work very well? There was probably someone somewhere in there that was being very judgmental. Some people just giving advice, maybe senior people giving advice to junior people, people who wouldn't listen, just interrupted. And my big bugaboo is the people who share outside the team meeting. I mean, if you're in a team, you're in the team, and what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So those are the important things. So I like this quote that she makes, and what it really means is, we as leaders, you have to be able to find the courage to be curious and be able to let those emotions surface and make sure that we're addressing things in the same way. Because if you want to think about getting into knowing people, you've got to peel away the layers. We know sometimes we find ourselves addressing the same behaviors over and over again. We got to figure out why. Why is that happening? And sometimes people just need space. I think somebody in one of the small groups earlier was talking about the power of the pause. Sometimes as a leader, it's really important to just stop talking and just listen, really and truly listen. Don't sit there trying to formulate your response. Don't share your wise insights. Just keep space in the conversation for people. And I think that's something that doesn't happen very often. I love this quote where she says, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings or squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage an ineffective and unproductive behavior. And I think that's pretty insightful. Now, that being said, I think as leaders, one of the things that's important is to understand how we can set boundaries. Um, we can cut down on the amount of time in a meeting and after the meeting behaviors and those kinds of things, but we can't do our job as leaders if unless we own other people's emotions and understand that it's not our job, but we can't serve the people that we're serving and try to control their feelings. We can't do that. So one of the things that I think is important, and you may or may not have been in a situation, but sometimes it's okay to say things like this. I know it's a tough conversation, and being angry is okay. However, yelling is not okay. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to do this with adults. It's hard to believe, but it's not just children we're talking about here. I think another phrase to keep in your little toolbox is, I know we are tired and stressed. It's been a long meeting. Being frustrated is okay, but interrupting and eye rolling is not okay. There's nothing more frustrating than being in a situation where people are starting to do those, physical behaviors that are actually very insulting. It's okay to say things like this. I appreciate the passion around these different opinions and ideas. The emotion is okay, but passive aggressive, put downs, no, we don't allow it. And being a leader in a team it's important to be able to have these types of phrases in your toolbox because sometimes it just needs to be said. And of course, I think this is a good one because it's call a timeout. When emotions are high and tempers are high and people are not communicating or listening, just like children, timeout. Go for a walk, catch a breath, get something to drink, and then come back. But we all need to just stop and bring things down, bring all that emotion down to an acceptable level. So she talks a lot about us putting on armor. You can see the quote here right from her book. And she talks about the fact that we use armor to protect ourselves. But you got to remember, if you're using that analogy, armor is heavy and it prevents us from growing, it prevents us from being seen, and it prevents us from being in connection with other people. Because if we're in fear or emotion is driving us high in self-protection, then there's kind of a pattern that we tend to do. We start thinking about, well, I'm going to armor up because I'm not enough. And if I'm honest about what's happening, maybe they'll think less of me. Or no one else has said anything, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to put myself out there. I don't see other people being honest, so why should I? And so it's actually, a way that we start to just almost turn things around on people. And I love the way she talks about this image, that when we armor up, what happens to us? So just for a minute in your notes, think about yourself. We're not going to share this. It's just a personal reflection, but what does it look like for you personally when you are armoring up, when you're kind of building that wall around yourself? Is it something in your body language that gives that signal? Do you say something? Or is it just your thoughts that really start things going? And she calls these like transformer behaviors. If you remember those transformer toys where we turn from one thing into another. But I think it's important to think about this because when you think about it and look at it, children find a way to protect themselves. And when we put on armor in the figurative sense, we use our thoughts, emotions, and our behaviors as weapons. We learn to make ourselves scarce. And as adults, we have to be vulnerable. We have to have the courage and purpose and connection to live our lives. We have to put down the weapons. We have to let go of our armor and show up and just be that way. So these next two slides, I'm just going to show them to you. You can come back and look at them later. There's actually 16 elements here. You can see that they kind of go on the left-hand side is what would be kind of characteristic when you see armored leadership versus on the right-hand side when you would see more of a vulnerable or brave leadership. This is something that I think is a nice exercise for you to do on your own by actually just looking at your own school, your own leadership, and look at the difference, right? But if you notice that, on the left, you've got the very extreme of people who are leaders who are very armored up. And on the right, you've got more courageous and brave leaders. And the second slide shows the same thing, and it goes all the way for 16. And it's, I think just simple things like, collecting gold stars versus giving gold stars, right? Leading from hurt or leading from the heart, those kinds of things. So this is something that I'll let you return to at your own leisure and maybe just kind of score your school and score your team. So we talked earlier a little bit about empathy. Who thinks they could really define empathy? Take a stab at it. Be vulnerable.
I was going to say, I guess having the courage to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Okay.
And kind of walk.
Anyone else? Yeah, just unmute. Lindsay, you could just unmute.
Sorry. It's not feeling sorry for someone, but like getting in the pit with them. There's like a visual that I've seen before where you're like in the pit with them. I think that, sorry if you hear my son out there.
Oh, you just gave me such a perfect segue. Okay. All right. So let's hear a little bit about what Brene tells us about this.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. So just some food for thought there. I think it's a cute little cartoon, and there's links to that in the module for you. And I think it's something that's going to be helpful. I'm going to stop there. I never know how long this is going to run with Brene Brown because it's usually we could go for 2 days with this topic and go on with the things that she does. But I'll give you a plug for her book and looking at some of her other materials. And if you look at the if you go to the end of the PowerPoint, there are some links to other things that you can watch for her. So what I'm going to do now, it's 7:20, so we've got an hour left. I want to give you this last hour to work on your ethical dilemma together in teams. 1 second to make sure that I've opened it for you. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to put you back in your breakout groups. Turn off your camera. Read your ethical dilemma. Take a break. Probably give yourselves at least a good 10-minute break. And then let's make sure that you follow the ethical dilemma. Make sure you follow the framework. Somebody's going to either be the person taking notes, or you're going to put it in Google Docs and you'll type on it together. Watch the time. I'm going to make sure that we all are back together in time to have a little bit of debriefing, probably at about 8:10, 8:15. I'll just be popping in and out and see how your conversations go. Any questions? Okay, if you haven't,
When will we,
if you haven't,
when will we find out the character?
I can't hear you, sorry.
Are we gonna be assigned the lead character? Or am I looking at the wrong thing?
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
It says in your breakout groups, you'll be assigned one particular dilemma from this article.
I think you're looking at the wrong thing.
Okay.
Would
Sorry.
you want to go to module, you want to go to module 4. You want to click on ethical dilemma. Can you see that? And you're going to have your framework and then the case study. I think you might be looking at one of the asynchronous activities or for next week.
I think I'm looking at the same thing, Angelica, because I'm seeing the different, uh, like the complainer, the slacker, the overachiever.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too. I think that we are just, I don't know.
Are you in week 4?
Yeah, it says week
Yeah.
4. Oh,
Okay.
asynchronous.
So
It says asynchronous article.
can you see my screen? So you're in
Yes.
week 4 and you're going to ethical dilemma, cyberbullying in the middle. And you're clicking on that.
Oh.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Is that where you are?
Yes. Now I am.
Okay. So yeah, I think you were in another area. Okay. Any other questions before I let you go? Okay. You've got your invitation to your room.
Do like a little investigation, and then I would like approach that student that took the photo, and I would just kind of like scare them into not doing it again. But I would be so curious to ask my principal like how they would handle something of this nature, because I've never really experienced something like this or seen how something like this plays out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say because I've always, I've taught pre-K, K, and first, so they don't really have their phone, like so we don't really experience it. And so I'd be really interested to hear kind of like the steps, I guess what of like what to do um in the situation. Because I feel like kind of like Lauren, what you were saying, like something needs to be done, especially if like it's impacting learning. It's just kind of like, okay, what are those steps? Because I'm used to the opposite end, I guess, of the age group where they just want to watch like YouTube videos and things like that. Not so much like the Snapchats back and forth or TikToks back and forth to each other. So,
But the scary thing to keep in mind is that when you get this degree, when you are finished with this degree and you get the endorsement on your Pell, you could be a leader in anywhere from pre-K through high school.
yeah, I'm just like, oh, yeah, me in middle school, I don't know.
They're great most of the time.
Yeah, like our office now, because our district office is getting remodeled. So like we're in the middle school. So I'm kind of experiencing middle schoolers, during passing periods, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you guys are like so tall and you guys are so big, you guys can walk to the next class on your own. You don't need someone to help you. So
It's just like, I mean, like, it's just this ethical dilemma is so wild because, uh, Dr. Spellman, we literally just had this discussion in our middle school meeting today with a TikTok that was made about a student, and it actually impact like the student did not come to school today because of the TikTok, and our administration's under like the the belief that if it impacts the child like at school, like we take care of it here. And so it's just, and then Edwin was sharing about how he also went through a similar situation recently, and his administration said, well, we can't do anything because it's outside of school.
Mm.
And we're like, my kids go to his school actually afterward, like when they go to high school, which
Yeah.
so like even like literally down the street, it's a different scenario. So I would be curious to know how like the two other middle schools in our area handle this, if it's just our school because we are such a small school in comparison, and our parents kind of expect us to take care of those issues, if like how that impacts it as well. So
You're going to have an interesting conversation.
I know I'm like I'm gonna be bringing this to my administrators tomorrow and be like, how do you solve this issue?
Yeah, I was communicating to them that like I asked the administrators because like the student came to me and I sent to the social worker, I'm so sorry, like those types of things. And yeah, their follow up was like there's not like even if we figured out who it was, because it's outside of our jurisdiction, like nobody like governs the internet, we technically can't do anything about it. And I was just like,
Yeah, but there's harm
so
being
like
done in the school, right? There's harm being done to the other kids in the school as well. So some very interesting dilemma questions you can grapple with in this one.
yeah, I think that becomes like I think like especially like my district is very like policy oriented. So it's like unless we're being like told explicitly by, ISB or the government, like sometimes it's better not to kind of develop our own policy and be like sequestered into it than to kind of take it, you know, scenario by situation. But yeah, like as you read this, it's just like, oh man, like what can like the principal do in that situation? I'm sure it's more than just like I'm sorry about that, and like we'll talk to a counselor.
Yeah, did you guys
I
have
feel like, I think it depends on the school policy because some schools, like, I think Lauren mentioned, like, or I don't know, if some schools have any sort of policy in regards to cyberbullying.
Hmm.
And so if the school has a policy about that and there is someone in the building that is breaking that rule, then that is a technicality. That's like grounds for either a suspension or at the bare minimum a suspension or something further. So I feel like one of the things that would need to be addressed is like what sort of tools and resources are available to investigate something of that nature. Like at my school, we have a police officer that is there with us 24/7. And so if there's a fight in our school or if someone like steals something from someone's locker, she actually rolls back the cameras. Or if like there's something that like vandalism in the bathroom, she rolls back the cameras and she checks the cameras and she's able to verify and like screenshot faces and stuff. So it's like I don't know how that would connect to something that's happening on like a anonymous screen name, because like if there's a legitimate screen name and they can tie it back to a person, I feel like what would need to happen is they would have to conduct one-on-one interviews with the students that were attending that play because they would have a roster of students who attended the play because they purchased tickets or, their class teacher took them based on the attendance. And I feel like it would be a very lengthy process, but that's one of the ways they could go about getting information.
And remember that this, whoever this Babelicious is operating outside of school, but they actually filmed him in the school play, in the school buildings. It's not, it's not all that clean. So you need to move through the phases and see what you come up with.
With that. So I'm trying to think of any other, I think a question like phone usage.
How can the app be locked? Okay. Okay, so like if the police, like could the police can parents contact police
Question.
since it's happening outside of school? But is this a police matter? Is this something that the police, because like, is it technically against the law?
That's where social media becomes such a wishy-washy situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. They could probably, that's a great question as well. I'm not sure if like there's threatening language. I think you can. If the police don't see the language threatening enough, maybe not, but maybe they could report to the apps that are being used, the platforms that are being used, they could report to that platform and get that person's account canceled or something. Not that they can't make another one, but
yeah. But I think that the fact that he's being recorded at school, like it now is filtering into the school. So the school should be playing some sort of a role in it. I have a question, Dr. Smillman. Like some of these ethical dilemmas, are we gonna talk, like bring them back to class and talk about them? Because like I'm curious to know like how these situations were handled and like what other people's perspectives. I know there's like sometimes not always a right or wrong answer, but I'm just like,
yeah, there's never a right or a wrong answer. We'll get back together and you'll hear what the other groups feel, but we don't know what happened. There is no, I don't have any answer key that says what happened. These are based on, they're taken from texts that are collected and based, obviously things are changed to protect schools and things like that, but they are actually based on actual dilemmas.
I feel like someone in the junior high or high school have a better, like more experience with this. So they might even have an experience of this happening and how their school handled it. So I'm interested to hear other.
Yeah, you'll hear that when we get back together. If we get through everything and get back together, one of the other groups has 2 junior high people in there, or junior high and high school. So they have some experience they'll share.
I want to know what they said.
Okay.
We just don't see it as much.
Yeah.
But
just
remember
questions.
that when you finish this program and you get the endorsement on your Pell, you are qualified to be a principal in anywhere from pre-K through high school. So you need to start thinking about all these different.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I mean, it could happen. Like, well, let me take it back. We had something similar, not as aggressive because it was from 4th graders, but on their Chromebooks on a Google Doc.
Yeah.
Like they were like messaging each other back and forth and bullying a kid over Google Docs.
Yeah.
And I just was like, but I think at the elementary level, like that's their form of social media. So like we were able to remove it, block it, because we have full control over that tablet or the Chromebook. So I thought that kind of interesting just to throw into, but like we have more control over that. We're at home in this scenario, they don't. Like it's an own personalized tablet.
So work your way through all of the points on the.
Yes, we are. I also shared it with you just so you have it.
How's
This
Dr.
one's like
we just had a question. I just had a question. How is explore the values, virtues, and or beliefs that may impact various stakeholder perceptions different from examine the emotions, interests, relationships, and perspectives of stakeholders? I'm not quite sure what you're reading. I have to get my copy up.
It's in phase 2. It's the
Yeah.
first 2 questions in phase 2.
Yeah, well, emotions and interests and relationships are different than the values and virtues, right?
Oh, sure. I can say, sorry, I didn't, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because you're first of all looking at the emotions and the way these people are interrelated, and maybe like, the perspective of the parents versus the perspective of the people in the school, that kind of thing. But then when you're talking about the virtues and values, that's something else.
That is something else.
But good, you're working your way through
So
each section. That's good.
for the emotions, we said the parents feel betrayed and angry. So then maybe for the values and virtues, they're prioritizing justice and protection.
There you go. Yeah. You've got it.
Yeah. Okay. So then with Sam being embarrassed, isolated, unsafe. I'm trying to think. Oh, darn it. No, here there.
Maybe he has a belief that he's not worthy of help if he's thinking these people don't care about me.
It could be
Right,
in
because they didn't
conflict
get
with could be in conflict with courage. He doesn't feel like he can be brave. He doesn't feel like he can face this because all he's feeling is that overwhelming feeling. So that virtue of courage for him is just he doesn't believe it.
Right.
Um, then we did parents, we did Sam. Oh my gosh, I keep doing the wrong button.
I think the principal,
Yeah.
I think he's like trying to balance justice and mm, accountability or courage.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe courage.
Okay, and the next one says identify and focus on what's essential. I mean, I think first and
Sam.
foremost is like Sam's safety.
Right. Yeah.
And the parents having the parents be reassured that maybe they can't solve the problem, but that they're putting things in place to help limit or lower these type of things happening in, at least in the school environment. That they're strict on bullying, that they're strict on anything. If they catch wind of any of these things, that there'll be strong consequences for kids that are engaging in it. So maybe kind of that talk to be able to ensure that they feel reassured that, okay, things are happening outside of school. I can't control that, but we can definitely control what's going on here, and it's going to be okay. So that reassurance as well, in a way.
Yeah, I think that goes off like rebuilding the trust between the
Yeah.
family and the school.
I added in like after the school policy on suspensions, I just put and disciplinary actions to kind of think about the conversations and the tools like what you guys were both saying. So I just added that in there after
Okay.
the suspension part.
Oh yeah,
Really
that makes
quick.
sense.
And then
Um,
I added accountability for virtue as well, because like number one, like the principal needs to be held accountable for that
yeah.
as well. And as well as like the students that are behind this. But like as an administrator, like you have a lot of accountability on you that like you need to really attempt to try, like if he had attempted to try to mitigate the problem and mitigate the cyberbullying, there could have been something done about it. So, holding the students accountable and holding himself accountable to be the safeguard for the students.
Yeah, because it could have taken a turn. Like it could have gotten like really bad, from him just saying, sorry, I can't do anything in a sense. when it's impacting his learning.
You know what also this reminds me of is that I remember there was an issue where like one student was being mean over social media, and the principal's response was to talk to both sets of parents and remind them of their duty as a parent to monitor their child's use on apps and social media, and reminding them that it's their responsibility to ensure that their children are using those safely, and that how like that is one of the risks of going on these apps is that like your child could be targeted, like your child could receive that negativity while engaging. And unfortunately there is a chance that like students could be anonymous or people could be anonymous, and like that's a risk that sometimes parents by default just like have their guards down, and they don't even realize until it's already happened. So I find that like the whole I feel like the virtues in conflict is like wanting to act and like fix the situation, but then also realizing that maybe that situation is out of your control to an extent, and having I don't know how to put that into words.
I guess kind of it makes me think of like one of the virtues like cooperation. Like they have a common goal. They all want their all children to, do well and care for, for each other and all of that. But we need to cooperate with each other because it is, like you're saying, the family's due diligence to also know like these are consequences of having these types of apps, but then it's also on the admin and staff too to also know like this is also what could potentially happen and impact their learning. I'm not sure if there's like a better virtue in place of cooperation, but that kind of is, I just like saw that as you were mentioning that.
No, that's a great one to point out. Out of all of these virtues, then which one would be the one that should be prioritized? Because like I'm like I keep hearing you all like everybody keeps sharing and it's just like yes, yes, yes. And they're like this is such a serious situation. Like not that last week's was not a serious situation, but I think like again, like just because a lot of us have experienced this kind of situation with our students, like it hits so close to home. Um, where it's like I think a lot of us want to protect our students. We want to be the people that our student like we don't want this to happen because it's so out of our control. And
Well, to address your question though, Lauren,
yeah.
remember the comment here is it asks if there are different virtues in conflict. And if there are ones that are in
Oh,
conflict, which one should be prioritized? It's not which one of all the ones that you name, but it's
okay, sorry, I misread that then.
so
Thank you for
you're
clarifying.
looking for the ones that are in conflict, and then, because it might be, like you said, there are some that really are kind of juxtaposed. And if they
Mhm.
are, then which one really needs to take the place in this? Yeah. Okay. And you probably want to just keep moving because you
Yeah.
want to get through all the four phases. You can always tag back and go back and put something else there, but you need to move through the four phases.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
So I
Possible.
think like maybe what accountability and cooperation, like if like
Yeah.
those kind of contradicting one another.
Stand up for like
Would you say courage and what?
yeah, just I would just say courage, courage to face who's ever doing this at school, courage to go to school, to like he has a right to an education and a right to learn.
Same
Uh,
with trust as well. Okay. Um, Recognize and name biases.
okay. Um, recognize. I don't,
trying to think here. What also about the determine the players that own the moral issues? Wait,
I think would that be Dr. Webb? Because the moral issue is, does he act on this? Does he not?
that's the whole, yeah. Does- I mean, I feel like that's the overall thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Morally, bullying
Mhm.
is wrong. Ethically, um, according to the school policies, the principal has that responsibility too, right? Like at the point when he didn't know if it was even a
I think when he didn't
child or student.
he, but there are still things that he could do. He
So
could
hard.
refer Sam to school counselor, a social worker. He could look into talking with certain homerooms about cyberbullying. What is cyberbullying? Like, I feel like educate students about the dangers of cyberbullying, how it affects others.
Mhm.
Like
And
other things you
some
could have done. I think it's so hard as a also think about your time and
I was gonna say, I'm sure he's this principal, like I mean, this is something that's gonna take hours and hours and hours and
okay. I think if we go down to this next one,
yeah.
what decision would the profession expect? This is tough because like I think the community would expect the principal to find who's doing it and solve the problem. I don't know. That's at least what I would think from the community.
Yeah, I agree.
Thoughts on that? Okay.
The community would
so
expect him to conduct an investigation to determine who is bullying, cyberbullying, and assign consequences based off of school policies.
a lot of schools are doing restorative like counseling with
Yeah.
students um in place of like a consequence because they're finding that they're not learning
Mm-hmm.
from the situations when there's just a consequence.
Can I just say figure out the best plan for what has happened?
Yeah, restorative practice slash consequence outlined in school policies.
Okay. Back up. Sorry, I jumped around. What would the profession expect? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Because I feel like with that one, you're doing your due diligence, but also taking preventative action for the future.
Okay. Let's do this.
Yeah, I like that one.
What was that?
It was workshops and resources for
Workshops. Thank
parents.
you.
Kelly and I can type for the last phase to give you a break. You've been typing a
Oh, it's
lot.
okay. I literally take all the notes like all the time for all my leadership, like my meetings.
The first question on the reflection says, does your final decision differ from your initial reaction?
Well, I guess we have to we didn't what is our final decision?
Oh, I guess you're right. I mean, I think I would pick B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without really knowing what the policies in place are already, it's really
Mhm.
hard to say you can. I would not make no decision, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the best pathway. And just say, and going with like, well, this is outside of school. I have no control right now of this.
Right. That's a very lazy way of washing your hands.
Yeah.
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 And then C is almost like it's not enough. It's not addressing the
Yeah.
actual situation that's happening right now. So I feel like B is the best option here.
Yeah.
Well, I think it differs from our original reaction because our original reaction was we didn't have any idea what to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No.
That is
That's
very
fair.
true.
We were all in shock.
Yeah. Like, oh no, what do we do? So yeah, it differs.
How did your personal and professional ethics influence the final decision?
I know it's not ethics, but I know that with leadership comes like, maybe it is ethics. Um, the ability to kind of put away your own biases or your personal beliefs aside. This angered me because, being part of the community, the LGBT community, it instigated a lot of anger in me immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Personal experience and personal feelings and all that. But obviously, being in this position, if we're ever in that position, I can't let that anger be present. I have to put that aside and look at it in a different lens. Um, so that's always hard. And I know we all have situations that happen in our classrooms, but it goes against what we believe and like and enjoy. But this one was deeply personal for me. So it was like calm and think clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
That's a good point. Um, seeing what it says next. It says, what leadership styles would an ethical and moral leader need to call upon to deal with this dilemma? We lost him again.
Did you scare him away?
Probably.
I think some people are still trying to get the last few sentences in. There we go.
Colleen, I don't have the copy of it. I think I clicked out of it. Do you think you could email it to me if I send you my email?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Okay, so some very interesting conversations. I liked the way it started out a little bit slow and pensive and cautious, and then you started to get your sea legs and get into some good conversations. So for the Colleen, I think were you taking notes for your group? Would you mind sharing your option A, option B, and option C?
Yeah, so for option A, we said that we would make no decision is made. You say like you staying outside of the scope, say like you're outside of the scope, and instruct them to like call the police or consult like a lawyer. Option B, we said then to open up a formal investigation, like advise like your legal counsel on next steps and then take preventative steps for the future. So we came up with assembly about digital footprint slash online safety, utilizing a resource officer to talk to students about online bullying, and then resources or slash workshops for parents on internet safety.
That was C.
That was B. So C was those three, but then we decided that because we were already talking about that preventative steps, we kind of added those into the B.
So, and B is that the choice that you went with?
Yes, we ended up for our final decision being B.
Okay. All right. Lindsay, who was taking notes in your group?
We kind of all were, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So whoever
We all
wants, or Megan, anybody wants to jump in and tell us your A, B, and C?
We honestly did not get to A, B, and C.
That far.
We were kind of discussing very hard into the different virtues and what we kind of got also off topic a little bit. We were talking about how we've seen this in our own lives. And I thought that was really interesting. I was trying to talk about how I had a situation today at work where I was like, how do you go about this? And morally struggling a ton with it. So we kind of got into that. But I think if I was to kind of go from it, we did bring in the idea of law enforcement, but we didn't know how that would work. And so that would be something we'd have to also be like, we need more information on to be able to dive deeper into that as well. But we had talked about creating like an anti-bullying initiative. So whether that was in cyberbullying, like the digital footprint, same thing, Colleen, but kind of diving into that and talking to kids about how that would look to make sure that we're also doing that respect of the parents and showing them that they have trust in us also teaching.
Cool. Okay.
We also talked about using restorative conflict resolution in this situation, in addition to like the preventative school-wide kind of initiative. If the bully can be identified, um, setting something like that up.
Okay. And then we have Lori, Lauren, Edwin, and Angelica who wants to share your A, B, and C.
So for option A, we wrote
Yeah.
that
You're all
we would
jumping in
address
at once, both.
Oh, we're so happy to share. We would address the issues within the school community, investigate and appropriately punish the student responsible for the poor behavior. Option B was leave the issues to be addressed with outside forces such as police and lawyers outside of the school. And option C was to go undercover to collaborate with Babylicious and find out their true identity.
Ooh.
You guys were really creative.
You can tell that two of us are middle school teachers, so we've had to go undercover before.
How do you go undercover?
Oh,
How do you go undercover?
Well, you know, when you're trying to catch your students vaping, you just send a teacher in the stall with their feet up right before the time, and then you catch students in the act.
Yeah, I think you're talking about maybe creating an account and engaging Babylicious in the account. Yes. And when you're nodding your head. So, yeah. Well, very creative. Very creative. What did you want to share, Edwin?
Well, I was just saying, yeah, like sometimes like our APSSs create burner accounts for
Yes.
that same reason to try to like catch the kids. Like, and I'm like, I didn't even know you guys could do that. They're like, yeah, we do it all the time. It's hilarious.
Cybersecurity, right? People do it all the time. Well, we're right on time. Make sure that one person in each group sends me that your document. You're getting braver. You're going to be moving through this more quickly next time. But I love the idea that you got very creative and got engaged. Just a couple of reminders. You're good this week. You don't have anything that's due this week, so you get to exhale. But do remember that your self-assessment and the assessment by other leaders is due on the 16th. So pace yourself so that you're doing that. Make sure that you have uploaded the leader aspirational interview into your portfolio and write your reflections this week now that you've got a little bit of breathing room. And I have opened up week 5 so that those of you that are super ambitious and have time on your hands can browse it and move forward. I'm happy to stay on as long as anyone needs me, but other than that, have a great evening. And thanks so much for playing with me tonight.
I have a question about the reflections. So after we upload them, like are those typically like a 1 page or 2 page reflection, or is it just like a quick write-up?
Are you talking about in the portfolio?
Yeah.
It's just a box that you just have a little box that you write in. So it's like a
Okay.
like a
So
text.
it's like a paragraph write-up.
Look at the prompts and answer the prompts.
Okay.
You know, a paragraph or 2 or 3. It depends on how much detail you want to go into.
Okay.
What I notice is that people, when they're in this first course, tend to be wordy, and then by the time they get to the last course, they're really short. So
Okay.
I
And
think,
it's not graded. It's just almost like as a portfolio for someone else to pull that up, and they're probably not going to want to read like a multiple page write-up, just something
yeah,
quick.
it's not, we don't want pages. We don't want a thesis. We just
Okay.
want you to look, it's more is not always better, but make sure you address the prompts. Yeah.
Okay.
Good
Thank
question.
you.
Thanks for asking. Anything else? You just all want to hang out with me tonight, is that it?
Thank you.
All right. Good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, Dr. Spellman, I had a quick question.
Sure.
So when she just said like she's uploading stuff onto the portfolio, what did she mean?
Okay, so you have your portfolio, your showcase portfolio, right?
Yes.
Where you put all your phase two things. And
Mhm.
then there's a section there. When I sent your assignment back with you, I gave you a sheet of directions of where you need to put things in the showcase portfolio.
Are you talking about that leadership assignment or how many assignments like
Um,
are like for these discussions when we have our discussions, are we putting that back into the portfolio?
no. When you do an assignment that's graded by me, so
Okay.
your interview,
Yes.
when I returned your interview, one of the
Yes.
things that I put in there, I gave you feedback, and I also said, please make sure now that you upload this assignment into your showcase portfolio. And then I said, there's attached to this, there's a sheet of directions as to where it goes.
Okay. So it's just the assignments, but like these discussions that we have and like the questions we answer, we don't put that into
No,
the
well, but what she's referring to is when you upload the assignment in there, there are some questions that you have to answer. There are reflections on why you're putting it there and why this really fits the standard. And
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah, and reach out if it's confusing.
Okay, thanks. Have a good one.
Okay, bye-bye.